Is there any pieces of equipment that you feel are missing in Dust that maybe would provide counters that aren't here currently, or I guess that obviously not for Dust, but for Legion and in the future.
Oh yeah, the shield bubbles that they talked about having would, there's that. A lot of E-War stuff that isn't currently available, like flashbang grenades, for one example. You could theoretically make that an equipment slot, or you could make it another grenade. Um, Disruptors so that you could affect people's comms. Um, you have stuff in Eve that affects targeting resolution. So if you had, say, for example, an anti-scanner, for lack of a better term, where it mess with passive scans in a given area, that could be really valuable. Webifiers aren't currently in the game. There are all sorts of gameplay of being able to, slow someone down within a given area as long as you have that engaged. Target painters would be another great one. Whether it make it so that, say, locking weapons like the swarm launcher can track better, or as it does in Eve, increase the damage value of things that are hitting them, or even just light them up. If you like put a silhouette around someone that was target painted, or as the active scanner does now, put a glowing arrow above their head, except if you target painted someone specifically, then it would be for the team wide, or there are a number of different possible ways that could be done. Shield transporters, aka shield reps, are another thing that's, they even have some of the code for that, but it's not currently being used in game. Yeah, there are a number of things that I feel like are possible.
Yeah, personally, one of the things that I would love to see is well, someone brought up on the forum somewhere about how dampening is less effective than precision, mainly because with dampening you're only dampening yourself, whereas with precision you get to see everybody and it kind of applies to the team. So it's like, and I understand that, and I understand like because the concept there, because it's like if you want to provide scans for your team, whatever, you just need one person to do that. Whereas if you need your team to dampen, then you need everybody to run dampeners. A cool equipment I'd love to see it. Something that maybe you could drop down, or I think that would be the best way to do it. Something like Nanohive, where you drop it on the floor, but then it creates an area or whatever that pretty much just dampens your squad or the team or whatever by a certain amount. Something that you can maybe like set in an objective and is like no one can see you, almost like an area effect cloak.
Yeah, something like that would be interesting. I also would love to, on sort of a related note, I would love to see the scan mechanics for Legion shifted a little bit in a few different ways. One, I really think that passive scans should be personal, not shared, because if you're in a squad, you can still provide that intel via comms. You can still relay it, but then you have some uniqueness where the active scanner has a value in a role and the passive scans have a value in a role, and you can make the passive scans have more precision and thus have like a scout hunter role as a specialty without totally invalidating the active scanner, whereas the active scanner is shared intel. Another big element that for Legion I would love to see changed is just remove the absolute yes no scanned unscanned thing. Um, if precision and profile match, have it affect the duration that you're scanned, much as we have with respawns. Like if you hold your spawn, your base respawn time shifts. The closer you are to the value of whatever it is that scanned you, the shorter the duration that you remain scanned would be. Even introducing a certain random number generation element to it would be great, where there's a range that you might be picked up on scans and it won't necessarily show up, and that would be another use for the passive scan, where if the passive scan is on quick little pulses but you have a small random element included in that, you could have someone who was pretty close to invisible even to the best scans, but they'd flicker in and out, and so you have to keep some awareness. But it prevents this situation that we currently have where they keep trying to balance scouts, and it's a problem because either you have someone who's totally invisible, and that becomes almost game breaking because they're totally invisible, or you have someone who can always see anybody no matter how damped they are, which becomes game breaking because then A, you know where everyone is at all times, and B, all of the stealth gameplay becomes useless. And I've watched this seesaw back and forth trying to figure out how to make that work, and it's like, well, as long as it remains either absolutely yes or absolutely no, you're likely to have a problem.
Yeah, because it also makes eWar modules really tricky to understand. I mean, even for me, I still don't understand them completely. Even like some of the scan tables and stuff, I'm just like, this is just too much. Especially when it's just like, okay, I'm gonna throw on an advanced precision enhancer and hope this works. It's like it doesn't, because you don't know. You don't know if it's actually going to help or not, or because there's then all the see, something I'd really like to see in Legion is more of simple stats or whatever, because when you have stats like, okay, you got 45 precision and 40 profile or something, and then each of them is a percentage increase or decrease, it just it's like, why can't everything is just like, okay, scouts are 4, assaults are 5, heavies are 6. Yeah. And then this is like, okay, a complex one or whatever, or even just like, no more complex whatever, just this module reduces your number by 1.
Yeah, if they could include that in the UI, it would be great to just have like, as you're putting things on your fitting, dynamically say, all right, I've put this precision enhancer on. How does that affect my stats? Okay, now I know. This is an obvious. But even just that, it wouldn't resolve everything, but it would be a great step forward to being able to just say, all right, this is what's happening here, because you're right. When you have a mixture of two different numbers, one you want to be low, one you want to be high, and then you're modifying both of them by percent values, and those percent values are being modified by both stacking penalties and skill buffs. So it's like, what is going on?
Yeah, it's like it would all be super simple. Well, not super simple. It's like, it would at least be helpful to at least see those values. You'd think that those values would be included in the fitting screen, or I mean, I understand that for new players it might be a little bit too much, but it's like, include an option for like advanced options. For the people that don't want to see anything, they just see their HP values and their shield regen, and all the simple stuff. But then there's like all the advanced values, the damage mod calculations, all these E-War stuff.
Yeah. Well, even just like have it be a second page, be able to tab over and have the one where it's applying all your skill bonuses, something like that. It's Pokey and I have actually been talking about that, where um, just like CCPZ's presentation about how to change the skill system for Legion. And what Pokey and I would rather see is, rather, as opposed to changing the skill system, just add a UI option. So you have what CCPZ is offering for new players as far as clarity and a step-by-step progression that is useful, but make that be an option. Make it be the default option that's turned on, so when someone just jumps in, they have it and they're using it. But for anyone who's a veteran who knows what they want, have the ability to turn it off. Don't force us to walk through a specific progression that may or may not be what we're doing. If you want to run, a commando with a mass driver, for example, don't require the progression all the way through to Logi to unlock the mass driver, and then all the way through heavy to unlock the commando, just to be able to run that one basic role that you already know you like and can use. And I think there's a lot that can be done that way, as far as just offering some UI options so that players have the information they need and want, but aren't just drowned in it.
You know how we have pre-made fittings in Dust? Something where it would be almost like a skill line or whatever, or here's this fitting, here are the required skills, and then you kind of just go through a menu or whatever, and look, it's like, okay, so first I need to skill into this piece of equipment in order to fit that, and it's like, and then once you have everything there, then you can purchase those pre-made ISK fits or something.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think that would actually be a really great way to open things up for new players and provide some solid progression. sort of like what the Black Eagle is, where you have all the module slots fit, etc., but just have the list on that fitting, like these are the skills that are required to be able to run this fitting. And so if you look at it and say, I want to run that, you have the checklist and it's right there available in the market. But also, if you want to run something that's nearly that, you can still look at it and say, all right, I need everything except this. And there, I need something else in it instead. And that would kind of, I think, open up the skill system to new players a little bit more, where they have a base that they can look at directly and tangibly. And then they can start venturing into the more complex interactions by saying, I want to tweak just that bit, just, that one module. I want to put this instead. And once you start take the first couple steps, it becomes a lot less overwhelming. But if you don't even know where to begin, for a lot of the new players that I've talked to, it's like they're just swimming. It's like, well, what is that even? Why do I want it? That sounds good. I'm going to skill into that because I like the way it sounds.
In the presentation, that was one of the big changes that I really liked, was them switching all of instead of having just a bunch of circles with numbers or whatever, it's like you actually see the item in there, and you can view the item and see what you're skilling into, uh, and not just have a bunch of words on the screen. In Dust, one of the first things I did is like I looked through the skill list to try and find a rocket launcher, and I saw the mass driver. I'm like, okay, so it fires projectiles, or not, it fires like explosive rounds, whatever. It has this much. That sounds like a rocket launcher. I use it as like, this isn't a rocket launcher, or like I had no idea that there was even a repair tool in the game until I had spent all of my skill points into assault suits and stuff or whatever, and then once I found out, I'm just like, how did no one explained this to me? This wasn't even in the tutorials. It wasn't that there was no starter fit with it. For the longest time, I thought the needle, like the injector or whatever, was the repair tool. I thought that there was just some way that I couldn't figure out how to use it in order to repair people. I had no idea. I don't know if they had they had the injector icons, but it just I hadn't realized that was what that icon was, I guess. To go stab someone. I just I pulled it out, was pressing R1, hoping that maybe I had to stab someone in order to heal them while they're up and alive, but
And there are so many stories of things like that where it's like the ability to figure out what something is even for is not opened up nearly well enough. Another one that I'd love to see is the ability to make fittings that you can't field. Like, you don't have to let anyone deploy in them, obviously, but just the ability to construct a fitting. Say, I want this suit and these modules with that weapon. Put it together, and then the fitting screen already has the ability to tell you when you don't have the skills and what skills you're lacking. So that's great. You build the fitting that you want. You can see the stats in the stat block. You can look at the suit and the weapon and, say, all right, this is a fitting. I like this fitting. I want to try this out. What do I need to skill into to be able to unlock it? And that provides some goals-oriented thing, and it's a player-defined goals-oriented thing, which is a lot more engaging than just this sort of like, I'd like to be better, please. Can I not do as poorly? That'd be great. What do I skill into? Where there's no context for it. And being able to share fittings too. That's something that Eve has that I think Dust would benefit from greatly, and hopefully at least Legion will have, because then you have the ability to save personal fittings, share them, and save corp fittings. So, for example, OSG has a few somewhat standardized fittings for training, and a lot of our man hours in trading are getting a new player in and then step by step walking them through building this fitting so that we know what they're working with, so that we can apply the training doctrine so that they're learning within a somewhat controlled environment. If we could just give them the fitting, it would save both the trainer and the trainee so much time and hassle. I mean, all told, since closed beta, if we'd had that feature, I think that it would save just OSG alone hundreds of man hours that have been put in. And it's such a simple thing. Just the ability to say, here, look at this fitting. And I was like, yeah, I like that fitting. I'll save it to my fittings. Sweet, now I have this and I can work up to it. Or I can build it, or I can buy it, whatever.
same thing with starter fittings. That's I mean, yeah, it's all malicious stuff or whatever, but I really enjoyed the way it was back when I first started, because when I first started, I could clearly see that there's four different types of suits. You got your assault, your logi, your scout, and your heavy. Yeah, it kind of didn't make sense for the heavy to have a swarm launcher, but oh well. I kind of understood that the heavy was designed for being able to stay alive, and at the time, it was just like it looks like, okay, this is the AV fit. This is the suit that I want to use if I want to do AV, which is somewhat true for forge guns and stuff. But then once they switched over to just the four medium frames, it kind of doesn't make sense why they don't have because now we have full racial parity, or almost with just the suits, to where it's just have one of each of the things. It's like you have one militia heavy, one militia scout, and then obviously we kind of have to do something about the militia medium frames, because they're it's just the assault frame. But
For both the roles and races, it's a bit homogenized now that we have so many of the other things present. Oh, actually, Bertati was talking recently, since it was suggested, about replacing the injector with the repair tool on the starter medic fit, which I think is at least a step in the right direction. Um, I don't know if it would be completely balanced, but I mentioned the concept of having your race just have a militia version of whatever their racial equipment was, so that it was a little bit more of a starter logi fit instead of just a starter assault medic.
yeah, and also to be I guess more diverse too, is that you have other players, even militia players, whatever, running uplinks and nano hives.
Well, and having all of the gear categorized, but having militia be its own category that's separate from everything else, has confused so many people that I know of, because they go and they're trying to check stuff out, and they say, all right, well, what's the lowest tier version of this that there is, so that I can try it out. And they see the standard, and they're like, all right, what do I have to invest to even be able to unlock this? And then they debate whether or not they're going to actually spend the points to test it. And there's all this militia stuff for people to use, but they don't go and look in the militia section, because that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for equipment, or they're looking at the AR, or they're trying out the scrambler rifle, or they're wondering about regulators. So they don't think, well, hey, I want to try a regulator. Let's go into the militia section. And when I first started, I thought the militia section, partially because I played Eve, was the loyalty point store. So I thought it was all this like high value stuff that I shouldn't even look at, because I wasn't going to be able to unlock it or buy it until I was much more advanced into the game. Eventually someone set me straight, but I ignored the tab completely, because I figured it was essentially all the proto gear that I could only window shop. And it's like, there's no point right now, I'll get to it later.
Something, I mean, anytime that I meet a new player, I just tell them, this is like, okay, do you know what a militia item is? And most of the time they have no idea, so I tell them, just like, okay, go to the marketplace, go into militia gear, and buy one of every item in there. Because then they have like a good amount of fitting items, whatever. I was super excited once they announced that they were adding those militia weapons into the game. I was like, oh, finally, like this is something that's been needed for
I've only
forever.
been asking since what, closed beta?
I mean, it was only a couple weeks ago that some new player I was playing with, he was talking to me about like combat rifles and stuff, and he'd been mainly using assault rifles, and I was just like, you go buy a militia combat rifle. He's like, oh, I had no idea that there was even this section in the marketplace, and that's what, like, I tell people that all the time, is that probably 70-90% of the players that are new that I've played with all don't even, like, I know players that had the, like, for instance, those 10 million SP players, whatever, probably still didn't even know that there was a militia section, because they're still using starter fit. And I mean, I tell him, this is like, go try out a militia heavy frame, and he tries it out, and he's like, whoa, this is so cool. He's like, I wish I had known about this. Is like, yeah, if only there's a militia HMG. Well, that's probably a bad idea, but uh, I tell him, and then it's like, okay, and you go try out a militia scout or a militia light frame and stuff. And he's like, whoa, and, I really like having. He's like, why isn't this a starter fit? And little things like that, NPE is definitely. I really hope that CCP has a definite or like an idea of how they want to finish off Dust. What is the minimum that they need, or what is the final, like? Do they need everything to be balanced? Do they need it to have a great NPE? Are they even caring about the NPE because they just want to focus on Legion? And like that's why I'm still. I think a lot of people are still confused. I mean, I think that's kind of the biggest thing with the player base is that no one really understands that, and they haven't made it very clear. I mean, yes, we're pumping out hot fixes now, but it still isn't clear whether or not this is just to finish or try and push towards Legion, try and get everything balanced for Legion, and they're just gonna abandon us because I think a lot of players believe that. But or if they're honestly trying to make Dust a completed game, because they know it's broken, they know it not even close to being complete, even though they were talking about this whole 10-year plan and stuff. But yeah, I don't know.
A clear roadmap would be a really big deal. That's one of those things that I've been asking CCP to actually, put out there for quite a while, because even just some of the basic debates about balance, if they simply said this is the intended role, like that would be huge. If even if I disagreed with what they were trying to do, if they at least said this is what we want, a Logi or a Scout or a tank to do, this is what we want it to be, well, then I can actually provide feedback. Then I can apply relevant information to what I'm telling them and a useful context, because I know what they'll actually listen to or act on. Where it is currently, we have huge chunks of the player base debating things like, should Scouts be sidearm only? And it's just like, all right, we can't even come to the table about what we're theoretically trying to do, because the argument about what the intention is or what the context should properly be is so mixed and complicated. Yeah, and if CCP would just release a roadmap and say, here's what we're aiming for the niche of each of these things to be, here's kind of where we're taking the game, and then hopefully take some feedback on that as well, but at least have a mission statement or a design document available where it's like, this is our vision, here's where we're going, now
Putting it into that perspective, it almost, like, looking back on all of it, it looks like, or it almost sounds like CCP really just doesn't know. Like, the whole reason that they haven't released anything or said anything is because they've just been relying on the player base to tell them what they want the Scout to be, to tell them what the assault is supposed to be. It's like they've thrown is like, okay, here's the general idea of what it is, you define it. And that's kind of a bad way to. I mean, I'm not a like I'm not an actual game designer, but I have designed games in the past, and I've actually made a few small little Flash games here or there. But it's like, I understand is like, you need to be the one deciding things. You take feedback and say, have other people tell you what works, what doesn't, but you don't have other people tell you how to make the game, because then what ends up happening is that everybody wants that your game in order to be something different, and no one can. And if you keep doing that, then you're just going to keep changing, and that almost sounds like exactly what CCP has been doing.
Yep. Well, and part of it is the division between the marketing management stuff and then like the organizational and dev group things, because you have things like what happened at FanFest, and CCP Rouge was outraged. Like, that was specifically not what he wanted to have going on, and marketing said, oh, well, it'll be better if we blah blah blah, and management said, yeah, marketing's got a point, that'll probably help our profit margin more, and just overrode the studio leadership, like the development team leadership, and the actual devs. So you have the people who are working on the project, who are putting in the creative energy and the man hours coding and so forth directly, and they're trying to do one thing, and their boss, who is ostensibly in charge of the project, is saying, all right, here's where we're going, this is the general mission, this is the vision. And then you have people who are above him and outside of that stepping in and just changing stuff. And there's been a fair amount of that sort of thing going on. It's like, all right, well, it's 5:14, we're releasing now. we're out of beta because it's the right thing to do marketing wise. It's like, but there are a number of things that aren't ready. Well, we're releasing anyway. And the Legion thing where it's just like, oh well, we're going to you know release this new information because we want to do it this way and we want it to be exciting and we don't want to take a hit on FanFest tickets or on ARM sales or anything any sooner than we need to. We'll release this information now when we have to do it. It's like, well, okay, from the marketing perspective, I can see why that would be. And, as a pure sales thing, they're even arguably doing their job. That's great. But that's not the creative side. That's not keeping faith with the community. There are all these other implications. And then you have CCP Rouge getting screamed at by the community, like, well, why did you treat us this way? And it's like, it wasn't his call. And he can't even openly say that very much because that would basically publicly be saying, yeah, well, my boss is a douche. And it's not the greatest thing for his career if he decides to go that route,
I think me personally, I don't know about many other people, but when I was watching the stream or whatever, and I saw Legion on PC or whatever, I just got super excited. I was like, this is awesome. It's like Dust is moving to PC, even if it is a new thing, even if it is separate or whatever. It's like, it's going to be an awesome, cool game. And yeah, this is just a cool little tech demo to show off what it is, and what kind of things they want to do. But the whole idea, the concept of them admitting that Dust just wasn't working on the PS3 and that the way that it really needs to go is to be on the PC in order to connect better with Eve, in order to do the things they want to do, and not have to worry about all the, having players read down a 3 GB game every single time they want to add new weapons in the game or whatever. So then when I heard that, and how much easier it was going to be for them to do this, is like, I was happy, I was super excited. I go to the forums, and what do I see? It's like the endless rage threads.
Yeah, I think that CCP making sure, especially as they ramp Legion up, that they're being very clear that the investment in Dust is something that will be persistent and carried over is going to be a big deal. There are still people who will be frustrated, obviously, because of things like, the console PC transition, so forth. But, excuse me, but, letting us know that the assets, especially skill points, and like all of our unique suits and BPOs and so forth are going to be carried over, so that the investment that we've put in time and money and whatnot into Dust doesn't cease to exist, is, I think, one of the biggest ways to make it so that people are committed to being involved in the process and maintaining the community, as opposed to just being pissed off because they feel cheated.
It was great talking to you, honestly. That I'm really looking forward to you and the other candidates. Like Parks said in one of his videos, is like, honestly, it doesn't matter who you vote for, because everybody here, it just seems like they're really focused and really great people. I mean, with the CPM 0, it was kind of just whoever was active in Dust and the main people, I guess. But with the CPM 1, it just seems like everybody really support, like anyone else that is still here, still in the game. Y'all seem like great people that are here to support Dust and are going to push forward and make it the game that we all want to be.
I agree, and I trying to come up with my ballot, because I decided I should probably post one and whatnot, but trying to narrow it down to 7 people out of the candidate field was so brutal, because there really just are so many good choices, which is kind of encouraging, because it's like, hey, even if I don't make it, even if all or half the people that I recommended don't make it, we'll still probably end up with a really solid group of people. So that's a nice way to be able to kind of just let it go. Like, we're likely to be in good shape no matter how it falls out.
Personally, for anybody else that's like other people that have told me in the past that me personally would make a great CFAM, I'm just like, honestly, it's like Cross here, he pretty much thinks exactly the same way I do. It's like, if you would vote for me, vote for this guy, because it's like we tend to share very similar viewpoints. But anyways, guys, that was Cross. He's got some great stuff there, great ideas, just an overall amazing guy. If you haven't checked out his stuff on the forums already, go do that. Honestly, probably my top candidate for the CBM one. Really hoping it makes it on.